Leading Britain's conversation, The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Well, what a funny old day. It's 1 hour to go before voting is going to begin. We expect a result at about 8 p.m. At some point in the next hour, the Prime Minister will give her closing speech on her withdrawal agreement. When that happens, we will cross live to the chamber. As a Brexiteer for most of my life, today should be a day of celebration. There should be street parties going on, and yet I feel her deal is so awful, I hope it gets voted down, because as far as I'm concerned, it's not Brexit. But I'm wondering from you, how do you want your MP to vote tonight? Please let me know. And if you think, look, it may not be a great deal, but at least we leave the EU, call 0345 6060 973. Or maybe like me, you think, no deal is better than this deal, in which case text to 84850. Or perhaps you don't think either option works and you'd rather your MP abstained, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course you can watch us on Facebook and comment there too. I've just come into the studio. I was down at College Green for about an hour opposite Westminster. There are thousands of people outside Parliament with Remain banners, with Leave banners. There are bells ringing, drums playing. The scene is pretty extraordinary. And I'm going to cross straight down to there and speak to LBC's political editor, Theo Usherwood. Theo, hello.
Good evening, Nigel. It's all very good-natured, isn't it? Lots of Leave campaigners, Remain campaigners blowing their horns, their trumpets, their placards in the air as they try to...
Yeah, there's a good police presence there as well. I think that's encouraged better behaviour, if I could put it like that.
I think you might be right, Nigel. Yes, on that one.
So, Theo, tell me, I just, Sky News seem to be very confident in terms of who they've polled and run, and they are predicting that the Prime Minister will lose by 226 votes. I find that a little bit difficult to believe.
I think that number is way out, to be honest with you, Nigel. It could be north of 166. That is the number by which Ramsay MacDonald, the Prime Minister, lost in 1924. But look out for the number of abstentions in the House of Commons when that final vote comes in. Now, it's very difficult to tell who has actually missed the vote on purpose or who's actually intentionally abstained. One way to do that is to look at who's voted in both lobbies, who's gone into the I lobby and then turned around, walked back down to the end of the Commons and then gone into the no lobby. Those individuals, those MPs, you could say, have definitely abstained. But it's a tactic that is now being used by the Conservative whips to try and ensure that they can keep Theresa May's defeat under triple figures, to try and get it down to 60 or 70. And that's important for a number of reasons. Firstly, they want to ensure that senior figures within the cabinet, the men in grey suits, don't go into number 10 tomorrow, late tonight, tomorrow, and say to the Prime Minister, really, your Plan B, which we're expected to be a tweaking of Plan A, what she's already put forward, is not feasible. It's simply not going to work. But also, and you know this from the European Summit back in December, the European Council don't believe that she can get this deal through the House of Commons, and so aren't prepared to offer any further concessions if this is such a significant defeat. Now, when Andrew Murison, the Conservative former Defence Minister, tabled his amendment yesterday, we saw 40 or 50 soft
and
Brexit.
that was to put a sort of sunset clause, wasn't it,
absolutely.
on the backstop deal? Yeah,
backstop would come to an end by the end of December 2022. Now, 40 or 50 softish Brexiteers signed up to that. The problem was the Speaker, John Bercow,
didn't pick it.
Didn't go and select it. He went and selected an amendment by Sir Edward Lee that didn't have nearly as many names.
And Theo, whatever she loses by, am I right in thinking, I'm heading off to the European Parliament for the morning because Monsieur Barnier will give the first official response, but is it going to be a day of Theresa May in Brussels tomorrow trying to get some concessions of some kind?
Yes, and she's going to have to move quickly because we're in a briefing with parliamentary officials earlier on this afternoon, and the message that they're sending out is that she has to table a motion with her Plan B by Monday, and that can then be amended by the likes of Nick Bowles, by the likes of Nicky Morgan, Conservative Remainers, and we know that they've published their bill today to put the liaison committee of chairmen and chairwomen of all the different select committees. The chair of that committee, incidentally, is Sarah Wollaston, the Conservative MP for Totnes, a big Remainer, in charge of the Brexit process. And what this amendment would do to that motion that would come forward on Monday and would be debated before January the 30th would enable Conservative Remain MPs to put their own legislation ahead of government legislation in Commons time, in effect taking control of Brexit.
That would, I have to say, anyone listening to Theo and listening to this now that thinks that tonight is going to be the end of the Great Tension, forget it. It's just the beginning. Theo, thank you. Let's get some callers. The switchboard's going like a Belisha beacon. Let's go to Peterborough and speak to Kevin, a first-time caller. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, how are you doing, Nigel?
So, imagine you're the MP for Peterborough. How are you going to vote?
Well, I don't know if her position's going to be that good anyway, but...
I know you've got some problems with a local MP, I know. But what do you... Yeah. But say it was you. How would you vote tonight?
Well, we pride ourselves in being one of the founding democratic countries of one of the founding democratic countries of the world. If we don't do what we are democratically charged to do, that's represent the people, you're going to have a yellow vest scenario of all scenarios in this country. Because if you keep prodding the bear, it's going to bite you. And that's what's going to happen to the MPs because they don't realise what they're doing.
But here's the problem. Kevin, here's the problem. Mrs May says if you vote for her deal, you're honouring the Brexit vote. And yet, as somebody who spent 25 years fighting for that, I don't believe this particular withdrawal bill does that.
No, you're exactly right. We're still shackled to the EU through the Northern Ireland backstop.
Yeah.
That's not going to change. I don't understand this country, Nigel, and I would say that people should Google about a speech that Peter Shaw gave at Oxford University in 1975, how detrimental it was to the very fabric of this country. I used to vote Labour. I wouldn't vote for the pish that Labour is today.
We do with that. Yeah, Kevin, I knew the late Peter Shaw, and those old-style left-wing Labourites were very anti-common market. Thank you. Anita is a first-time caller from Oswestry in Shropshire. Who's your MP, Anita?
Hello, Nigel. Pleasure to talk to you. My MP is Owen Patterson.
Ah, I know Owen. Now, I'm certain he will vote against tonight, won't he?
Yes, I'm sure he is going to vote against it. Thank goodness for that.
OK, so you don't like this deal, Anita?
Oh, no. Leave means leave, Nigel.
Well, you're talking to the right person with that.
Leave means leave.
Yeah. So what do you want? I mean, what should Theresa May do now? Should she now say, all right, Article 50 says if we can't get a withdrawal agreement, we leave with no deal on WTO rules? Is that what you'd like to see her do?
Certainly, Nigel.
Yeah,
Certainly.
well, Anita, thank you. I don't think she will, but you never know. Alison is a first-time caller from Epsom. Hi, Alison.
Hi, Nigel. How are you?
Good evening. Now, I'm guessing that your MP is Chris Grayling, is that right?
He is, yes, pound in the jar and all of that stuff.
Right, yeah. So, now he, of course, is going to vote for this deal, isn't he?
I know, and I think he's really letting down his constituency, because I definitely think he should be voting against this deal.
Would you know, Alison, in the referendum campaign, I spent a bit of time with Chris Grayling. I gave him a lift from Stoke-on-Trent. I gave him a lift from Stoke-on-Trent back to his house, not too far away from you. And it was funny because there he was in Stoke-on-Trent speaking, a Conservative cabinet minister, getting a standing ovation. And I said to him, well, that's the last time as a Conservative cabinet minister you're going to get a standing ovation in the north of England. And he really did believe in Brexit very, very thoroughly. But maybe, Alison, he believes that this is the only way we can actually leave the treaty.
Well, I don't believe that. I actually voted Remain, but now we have voted Leave. I think that they should have negotiators that negotiate a good deal for us. And Theresa May has absolutely failed to do that. She's had several Brexit secretaries who have failed to do that. So we should have a general election and have some people go and negotiate who know how to negotiate.
Should we get some business people, Alison?
That might be a good start, do you think?
Yeah. People who understand that in a negotiation, the other side need to know that you're prepared to walk away, and they never believe we would. Alison, very interesting perspective from somebody who voted Remain. Thank you. Jack is a first-time caller from Southampton. Good evening, Jack.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I am very well. Who's your MP, Jack?
Well, I'm actually a student, so my actual MP is from Stevenage, so he's Steve McPartline.
So are you one of those people with 2 votes?
No, I'm proper. I only vote once. I just vote for him.
Right, now, Jack, OK, so you're slightly split geographically. What if you were, Jack, the youngest MP in Parliament? What would you do tonight?
Well, I sent him a very good letter. I was not impressed with Theresa May's deal, and he wrote back to me very, very nice, and he said, he's not scared of a no deal, and he's going to be voting against it. So
Okay.
I'm very pleased to hear that.
And what age are you, Jack?
I'm 21.
But we're told that everybody your age thinks the European Union is truly wonderful.
Oh, not where I am, not anyone I speak to. Probably because I told them, but...
So you would say down there, both points of view are reasonably well represented, yeah?
Yeah, well, I speak to people who think leaving is the best thing. I think people who think that remaining is the best thing ever. So,
Yeah, this is too.
I don't think there's anyone.
It's often too painted, this, in terms of black and white. There are all shades of grey. Jack, thank you very much for your call. Very good indeed. Down to Aldershot to speak to David. Good evening, David.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, what do you want your MP to do?
I want him to vote against the deal.
Yep.
But I think the deal will go through Parliament for the same reason that Theresa May won the no confidence vote. I think she's going to try and blackmail as such the MPs and try and get them to push the deal through. I don't think she's really interested in what the constituents of the MPs or how the MPs will vote.
Well, yesterday, David, I mean, I felt yesterday that when she said, it's my deal, or there could be no Brexit, she was almost trying to blackmail her MPs into voting for it.
Exactly.
David, I let me tell you something. She's not going to win tonight, all right? That is impossible. What is not impossible is that she goes to Brussels, is seen to get some kind of concession, and the clock keeps on ticking, because there are just 73 days to go. So it is not totally impossible that at some point in the future she could get this deal through. But there would need to be, David, I just put this to you, I think there'd need to be a fundamental change to the backstop to get that.
Yeah, of course.
Definitely.
And the other thing I wanted to say, because I heard the other caller when he said his age, and you were quite surprised.
Yes.
Well, I'm 20 years old, and I think actually, younger people are badly represented in politics in the sense that, it is shown across that lots of the younger people are pro-EU, but from my experience, there is a large amount of anti-globalist people who don't want this.
David, do you know what? I see that with my online conversations every single day. Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody. This is the Nigel Farage Show on the big day. It's 6:15 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. Well, we're waiting for the Prime Minister to come and give the summing up to this debate before the votes begin. Final vote expected at around about 8 p.m. this evening. You'll get it live, of course, here on LBC. Sky News an hour ago saying that she was going to lose by 226 votes. I don't believe that for a moment, but I still think it's going to be a very significant loss. But you can, of course, if you want to, vote yourselves. Yes, you can go to Twitter at LBC and vote there. We've got a poll. 15,000 of you so far have voted. At the moment, there's a big majority of you who voted on the LBC Twitter poll are saying they would vote against the deal. And some polling out overnight from YouGov offering people a range of options. Do you want no deal? Do you want May's deal? Do you want to stop Brexit completely? Do you want a second referendum? So people offered, 5 or 6 different options as to what they'd like. And interestingly, only 8% put a second referendum at the top of their list. And I do sometimes wonder whether everything we hear about a second referendum, and we see the European Union flags flying outside Parliament, the campaign for a second referendum, I don't think it's gripped the country as a whole. My feeling is most people want a resolution, but they're not going to get it tonight. Keith says, never in my lifetime have I ever loathed my government so much. Keith, I think I agree with you, because they're pretending They're pretending. I heard Michael Gove this morning. They're pretending that this is the Brexit we voted for. It clearly isn't. Mark says, Boris is my MP, so he's bound to vote against. He'd better do, Mark, otherwise he's in real trouble. Jane says, my MP is voting for the deal, yet representing a substantial Leave area. Jane, your MP will say, with this deal, we take back control of our laws, our borders, our money. That's what the Prime Minister says. The problem is, it just isn't true. Catherine is a first-time caller from Hartlepool. Good evening, Catherine.
Good evening, Nigel.
Now, you, of course, were represented by Peter Mandelson not very long ago as your MP, weren't you?
That's right, or it's now Michael.
And what's he going to do tonight?
He's voting against.
And is he voting against because he thinks it's a bad deal, or is he voting against because he wants a general election, do you think?
No, he's voting against it because it's a bad deal for his constituency.
OK. And do you feel, Catherine, that is the right thing for him to do?
It is, because that's how I feel, Nigel. We should have never gone in the first place.
Just very interesting, Catherine. There was a front page this morning in the Sunderland. I know you're not Sunderland, but the Sunderland Echo. And of course, it was that Sunderland result on Brexit night that made many of us think, gosh, this really is possible. And it's a reader's poll. It may not be scientific, but 70% on the front page of today's Sunderland Echo want to leave with no deal. They just want to get it over with and get us out on March the 29th. Is that how you feel, living in Hartlepool?
Yes, we should leave without a deal, then negotiate.
I think if we did that, Catherine, they would come running down the street after us, so desperate would they be to sell us champagne and BMWs and all the rest of it. Catherine, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to cross over to Liverpool and speak to Steve, another first-time caller. Hi, Steve.
Good evening, Nigel.
Good.
It's a pleasure and an honour to speak to one of the only honourable politicians we have left in this country.
Well, that's very sweet of you. Some would disagree vehemently with that, but that's the way things are. Steve, tell me, imagine yourself in the House of Commons tonight. Do you think the Prime Minister deserves a bit more support than she's getting?
No, I don't actually. I think she's been duplicitous from the very beginning, Nigel. I think she was there for a reason. I think it's been a political stitch-up from the very beginning when they shafted Andrea Leadsom, who was obviously very popular with the Tory party, and they parachuted Theresa May in, who was a disastrous Home Secretary, and she's proven to be an equally disastrous Prime Minister.
So she was the establishment choice, in your view?
Absolutely, she was. Absolutely. Now, if we look at what's going on in Germany today, Nigel, they're teetering on the brink of recession. Paris is basically in flames.
Yes.
Italy, Poland, Hungary are forming a bloc against the demanderings of the likes of the five presidents, obviously Juncker being one of them. Mm-hmm. We're also seeing huge populism rising throughout Europe. Now is a good time to be getting out. Now is a good time to be leaving. We don't want to be left in when the ship starts sinking. We need to be jumping off now.
We need to be in the lifeboat. The lifeboat off the Titanic, Steve. No, Steve, I agree. And there's one more thing, Steve, I'm going to add to you. By the way, everything you've said is right. The industrial production figures that were out on Monday, yesterday, showing that in both France and Germany, a quite significant downturn. But, Steve, let me add one more thing to this list. The Italian banking system is in very real trouble, all right? Already we've seen a number of small municipal banks going bust over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, but the big ones are potentially in trouble. Now, if they were to go down, that would spark a big global crisis. But my worry, Steve, is if we're still members of the Union, when this financial collapse happens, we will find ourselves effectively having to bail out much of the European Union. I think there are lots of reasons for us to leave. Steve, do you think that, given the size of her defeat tonight, that Mrs May will change her mind tomorrow and say, right, if it can't be my deal, I'm going for a no-deal Brexit? Is there anything in you that gives you confidence this Prime Minister might do that?
I believe that was smoke and mirrors, Nigel. I think that was an attempt to bring in people who were against her. I think that's obviously, people have seen through that facade now. I think she is basically ruled by people within this country. And people call them dark forces, deep state, whatever. That is real, and it's real in the United States as well. And I think she's limited to what she can do because of the people who basically she works for. Her bosses are going to deem and demand what will happen.
Well,
I don't think she has any say in the matter.
Right or wrong, Steve, one person who has been very influential and deserves a mention tonight is Ollie Robbins. because Ollie Robbins is really the architect of this. It's Mr. Robbins' deal that's going to get smashed. Steve, I thank you very much indeed. Hand on heart, I'm asked, do you think we will leave the EU one way or the other? Whoever sent me that text, my answer is yes, we will, because I believe the genie's out of the bottle and the public want it. I believe the union itself is failing dismally in many ways. However, do I think we're going to get a clean break on March the 29th? No, I don't. And anyone that listens to me knows I've been pretty pessimistic about this for a long, long time. We will get there in the end, but there may be more big battles to fight. I'm going to the East Coast, to Lowestoft, to speak to Deborah, a first-time caller. Welcome, Deborah.
Hello, Nigel.
So, what is your MP going to do?
Our MP, Peter Aldous, is going to vote with Theresa May tonight, and I'm from Lowestoft,
yes,
a fishing town,
yes,
which has been absolutely destroyed by the EU. And it's very sad to see, and I suspect he has the ear of bigger businesses like the poultry farmers who use lots of EU workers. So I've written to him on a weekly basis, asked him not to, but he's not going to change his mind.
I bet he loves you, Deborah. I bet he really does.
He does.
Yeah, I bet he... Deborah, it's very interesting. Your county of Suffolk is fascinating.
Is it?
Because, well, it is. It's beautiful, and I was up there the other week. I was in Albury the other week, and it's a lovely county.
Yes.
How interesting that every single constituency in Suffolk, in the referendum, voted to leave, right?
Yeah.
And every single MP in Suffolk voted to remain.
Well, indeed, and I've done a lot of research on the local MPs, and it's almost as if they don't represent the demographic of the towns, the people that are here, the working class people, and to ever have voted Remain in a fishing town like Lowestoft is appalling. And the sad thing is, he's a nice guy, Mr. Aldous. He's done lots of good things for the town, we think, but this is a shocker.
Yeah,
and,
well, Deborah, I tell you, this is one of the big stories of us not being properly represented. Deborah, I thank you. Well, the Brexit debate is going on. The Prime Minister has not yet risen to her feet, but as soon as she does, we'll cross live. I'm going to quickly go to Rutland and speak to Alan. Alan, good evening. First-time caller, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Nigel.
So you're represented, of course, by a man who's changed sides, aren't you?
Alan Duncan, yes.
Changed sides. Said he was a Brexiteer.
I wrote to Alan Duncan, but I didn't hear anything back. For me, the whole thing, I followed it quite closely. And the situation as I see it, first of all, for Theresa May to have a Brexit secretary and then sneakily send another team of behind these people, behind the team that are meant to be negotiated, to sneakily send another group to renegotiate on the quiet.
Yeah,
is for me, you can't in anything you can't do that. Well, in business, it's completely unacceptable.
And that's why David Davis resigned. So Alan Duncan is going to vote. Alan Duncan is going to vote for this deal, isn't he?
I know he is, which he shouldn't, because the deal is it's an awful deal.
It's a shocker. It's a shocker. Alan, I've got to leave you. I'm sorry. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:30 in time for the news with Lisa Aziz. Well, Jeremy Corbyn is on his feet in the House of Commons, and he's the penultimate speaker. It'll, of course, be the Prime Minister who finishes up, and as soon as she gets to her feet, we will cross live to the House of Commons. Voting will begin at about 7 o'clock. There'll be a series of amendments, none of which are expected to affect the final vote. And the big announcement should be at about 8 o'clock. The Prime Minister is going to lose heavily. I would suggest nowhere near as heavily as many of the pundits are saying, with numbers like 226 being punted around all day. I don't think it'll be anything like that, but it's going to be a big loss. And the whole thing is a total failure of leadership, in my opinion. The Prime Minister says she's delivering Brexit, but that is not how Brexiteers feel. So let's cross live when she starts. But in the meantime, let's keep going with the callers. How do you want your MP to vote? What would you do if you were the MP sitting in that chamber tonight? Would you maybe say, do you know what? I don't like this deal, but at least we leave the European Union on March the 29th. Or is it just too awful? Or are you one of those 8%, according to YouGov, when given the choices, that feel a second referendum is the only possible solution? Ashley is a first-time caller from Wisbech in Cambridgeshire. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Yeah, my MP is Stephen Barclay.
Yep.
I think he's the puppet of the Conservative Party at the moment. He'll do anything that Theresa tells her. And yeah, he'll vote for it tonight, even though he is an extreme Remainer, extreme Leaver, sorry.
Yeah, but he's got a nice job now, actually, hasn't he?
Well, and that's why he'll vote for the deal.
Yeah. It's amazing what a ministerial car will do, you know, Ashley.
Absolutely. I mean, in the fens here.
Because when he was, I'm sure, because when he was appointed, the strange thing was that I mean, virtually nobody in the country even knew who he was.
We don't even know who he is here.
That is the comment of the evening. So he's going to vote for the deal, and you want him to vote against, Ashley, do you?
Absolutely. I mean, I am a Remainer, but the deal that she's got on the table is awful. And I don't think it's for us at all. So I think we should probably leave and then, you know, fight hard for a decent deal afterwards.
It's interesting, Ashley. I am getting a sense that there are quite a significant number of Remain voters, like you, who say, look, I wanted to remain, but the country voted to leave and it should be delivered. And there's quite a few people like that out there, isn't there?
I think there is. You know, we can't do a negotiation in 27 other countries and get a great deal while trying to keep all the benefits. It doesn't work like that. We have to make our place known and fight for it hard.
Yeah, it's choosing a fork in the road, Ashley, is the way that I put it, a decision. Thank you, great call, very interesting. And again, it's very interesting, you know, what we try to do on this show and across LBC is get people with all different political points of view. And you know, if you're a second referendum supporter, you can come and ring me up and talk to me, and we'll do it, if we can, in a civilised manner, because that, I think, is really important. Jeremy Corbyn still on his feet. You know, he's saying that this deal is a reckless leap in the dark. I don't necessarily see it myself as that. As soon as the Prime Minister gets up, we will cross. But for now, I'm going to talk to Saj, a first-time caller from Oldham. Good evening, Saj. Hello.
Hello. Hi, good evening.
Good evening. So, Saj, what do you want your MP to do?
My MP is
Saj, I hate it. I've got to let you go. We're going live to the House of Commons, the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this debate has lasted some 8 days, over 54 hours, with speeches of powerful sincerity from over 200 honourable and right honourable members. It has been historic for our Parliament and for our country. We have heard contributions from every perspective, looking at all aspects of this complex and vital question. We've seen this House at its most passionate and vigorous, and I thank everyone who has contributed. No one watching this debate can be in any doubt about the strength of this House of Commons as the fulcrum of our democracy. This is a debate about our economy and security, the livelihoods of our constituents, and the future for our children and for generations to come. It goes to the heart of our Constitution, and no one should forget that it is a democratic process that has got us to where we are today. In 2015, my party stood on an election manifesto that had as a centrepiece the promise of an in-out referendum on the UK's membership of the European Union. The British people responded by electing a Conservative government to follow through on that promise. That is what we did when this House voted overwhelmingly to hold the referendum and put the choice in the hands of the British people. Indeed, 470 current members voted in favour of it, and only 32 opposed it. That campaign was keenly fought. It caught the public imagination like few campaigns before it. Turnout was 72%, higher than for any national poll for a quarter of a century. And while not overwhelming, the result was clear and it was decisive. Something this House accepted when we voted overwhelmingly to trigger Article 50. 436 current members voted to do so, only 85 opposed. Parliament gave the people a choice. We set the clock ticking on our departure. And tonight, we will determine whether we move forward with a withdrawal agreement that honours the vote and sets us on course for a better future. The responsibility of each and every one of us at this moment is profound. For this is an historic decision that will set the future of our country for generations. So what are the alternatives that present themselves? First, we could decide it's all too difficult and give up, either by revoking Article 50 or passing the back buck to the British people in a second referendum. But I believe we have a duty to deliver on the democratic decision of the British people, and to do so in a way that brings our country together. A second referendum would lead instead to further division. There'd be no agreement to the question, let alone the answer. It would say to the people we were elected to serve that we were unwilling to do what they had instructed. Now, the second possible outcome is that we leave on the 29th of March without a deal. But I don't believe that's what the British people voted for, because they were told that if they voted to leave, they could still expect a good trading relationship with the European Union. And neither would it be the best outcome. Our deal delivers certainty for businesses with a time-limited implementation period to prepare for the new arrangements of the future relationship. No deal means no implementation period. Our deal protects the rights of EU citizens living in the UK and UK citizens living in the EU, so they can carry on their lives as before. No deal means no reciprocal agreement to protect those citizens' rights. Our deal delivers the deepest security partnership in the EU's history, so our police and security services can continue to work together with their European partners to keep all our people safe. No deal means no such security partnership. And our deal delivers the foundations for an unprecedented economic relationship with the EU that is more ambitious, that is...
I said earlier it was becoming really rather a noisy and unseemly atmosphere, and that has now resumed. It must stop. The Prime Minister must be heard. The Prime Minister.
Our deal delivers the foundations for an unprecedented economic relationship with the EU that is more ambitious than anything they have ever entered into with a third country. It will give us the benefits of trading with the European Union and the ability to forge new trade deals in our own right. No deal means those new trade deals come at the expense of a trade deal with Europe, not in addition to it. So while it is categorically wrong to suggest that our country could not ultimately make a success of no deal, it is equally wrong to suggest that this is the best outcome. Now, third, there is the path advocated by the Leader of the Opposition, and we've heard it again, of calling a general election. But today's vote is not about what's best for the Leader of the Opposition. It is about what is best for the country. And at the end of a general election, whatever the result, the choices facing us will not have changed. It will still be no Brexit, leaving with no deal, or leaving with a deal. And there's no guarantee that an election would make the parliamentary arithmetic any easier. All it would gain is 2 more months of uncertainty and division. In 2017, the two main parties both stood on manifestos that pledged to deliver the result of the referendum. They got over 80% of the vote. People had the opportunity to vote for a second referendum by supporting the Liberal Democrats in 2017. Just 7% of voters did so. It is the job of Parliament to deliver on the promises made at the last election, not to be seeking a new one. Now, some suggest there's a fourth option, to agree that we should leave with a deal on the 29th of March, but to vote this deal down in the hope of going back to Brussels again and negotiating an alternative deal. But no such alternative deal exists. The political declaration sets the framework for the future relationship, and the next phase of negotiations will be our chance to shape that relationship. But we cannot begin those talks unless or until we agree the terms of our withdrawal. And the European Union will not agree to any other deal for that withdrawal. So having ruled out all of these options, we're left with one: to vote for this deal tonight. One that delivers on the core tenets of Brexit, taking back control of our borders, laws, money, trade and fisheries, but in a way that protects jobs, ensures our security and honours the integrity of our United Kingdom. One that strikes a fair balance between the hopes and desires of all our fellow citizens, those who voted to leave and those who voted to stay in. And if we leave with the deal I'm proposing, I believe we can lay the foundations from which to build a better Britain. And as Prime Minister, I would not stand at this dispatch box and recommend a course of action that I do not believe is in the best interests of our country and our future. And there are differences in this House today, but I believe we can come together as we go forwards. And let me reassure anyone who's in any doubt whatsoever, the government will work harder at taking Parliament with us. And as we move on to the next phase of negotiations, we will be looking to work with Parliament to seek that consensus. But, Mr. Speaker, let me turn to the most contentious element of our deal, the Northern Ireland Protocol.
My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, knows that what concerns many of us is the possibility of the permanent nature of the Northern Ireland backstop. May I refer her to my Amendment B on the order paper, which sets a deadline for that backstop, and may I ask her what is the attitude of the government to my amendment?
Can I thank my right honourable friend for the question he's asked and for the work that he has been doing to try to find a way through on this particular issue. And I know he's spent a long time consulting with international lawyers on this issue. The government isn't able to accept the amendment that has been selected, that my right honourable friend has put down that has been selected tonight, because we have a different opinion and a different interpretation of the Vienna Convention. But I note that my right honourable friend has put down an alternative proposals in relation to this issue. The government is willing to look at creative solutions and will be happy to carry on working with my right honourable friend in relation to that particular issue. I said I would turn to the Northern Ireland.
Order. The House must calm itself. Zen. Restraint, patience. Hear the Prime Minister.
I set out the government's position in detail on my statement yesterday, so I'm not going to go over it again. But the key thing to remember is this isn't a commitment we're making to the European Union. It's a commitment to the people of Northern Ireland and Ireland that they will be able to carry on living their lives as they do today. It's about saying that whatever happens when we leave the EU, we will honour the Belfast Agreement. Its success has been built on allowing people from both communities in Northern Ireland to feel that their identities are respected under the principle of consent. For many people in Northern Ireland, that means having a seamless land border between the UK and Ireland, which is also essential for their economy. For others, that means fully respecting the fact that Northern Ireland is an intrinsic part of the United Kingdom. No one wants to see the return of a hard border. And as a proud unionist, I share the concerns of members who are determined that we do not undermine the strength of our United Kingdom. But
you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. We're taking Theresa May's speech live ahead of the vote.
Arrangements that deliver those ends. And it's not just as simple as some would like it to be. So, as Prime Minister for the whole UK, it's my duty to provide a solution that works for the people of Northern Ireland. The answer lies in agreeing our future economic relationship, but we need an insurance policy to guarantee there will be no hard border if that future relationship is not in place by the end of the implementation period. I'll give way to the Leader of the Democratic Union.
Very, very grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way. And would she agree that whatever one's view on this withdrawal agreement and whatever arguments that people deploy, that we should not be using the peace or the political process in Northern Ireland as arguments for voting for this deal or voting against it? Would she agree that is completely and utterly out of order. Make that clear to all of our Cabinet colleagues as well.
To the right honourable gentleman, I think everybody across this House is committed to ensuring that we maintain the arrangements of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, that we also ensure that we maintain the many benefits that have come from the peace process in Northern Ireland. And that should not be disrupted, and that should not be affected in any sense. But I also say that whatever future relationship is going to be negotiated or people want to see being negotiated, that insurance policy is essential. Any of the other proposals, Canada, Norway, any number of variations of those models, all of them require the insurance policy, and that is the so-called backstop. And no backstop simply means no deal now and for the foreseeable future. And I don't want to see anybody being able to exploit no deal and bringing doubt about the future of our union as a result of that. And let's remember, if I may say to this House, what the withdrawal agreement does deliver for the people of Northern Ireland. An implementation period, certainty for businesses. Protection of citizens' rights, certainty to thousands of families. No hard border, unfettered access to British and EU markets. Protection of the single electricity market across the island of Ireland, securing energy supply in Northern Ireland. Continued security cooperation with our European allies that the police service of Northern Ireland say is essential. And above all, the protection of the historic Belfast Good Friday Agreement. The deal we have puts our union first. Now, let me turn to the contribution of the Leader of the Opposition. Characteristic speech, characteristic of his whole approach to Brexit, long on criticism and short on coherence. He's claimed that he'll be able to renegotiate the deal in a matter of weeks, get a drastically different outcome, and despite the European Union making clear that's impossible. But everything he does is designed to avoid taking any difficult decisions, saying one thing to one group and another thing to another. In the general election, he said in his manifesto, freedom of movement will end. On Sunday, he said, I'm not against the free movement of people. When asked about Brexit in a German newspaper, he said, we can't stop it. The referendum took place. Article 50 has been triggered. In his speech at Wakefield last week, and again this evening, he said a second referendum was an option on the table. He says Labour would run an independent trade policy, but he wants to join the customs union. He says he's opposed to no deal, but he says he's opposed to withdrawal agreement and the backstop without which there is no deal. So the question is, what is his position? Because he has failed in his responsibility to provide a credible alternative to the government of the day by pursuing from the start a cynical course designed to serve his own political interest and not the national interest. He has forfeited the right to demand loyalty from those of his MPs who take a more pragmatic view, because he doesn't care whether we leave or not, with a deal or not, as long as he can maximise disruption and uncertainty and the likelihood of a general election. And I hope that members opposite, who faithfully pledged to their constituents that they would respect the result of the referendum, that they think carefully before voting against a deal which delivers Brexit. And I hope that those who fear leaving without a deal, whose constituents rely on manufacturing jobs, think very carefully about rejecting a deal that is the only guaranteed way to take no deal off the table. Mr. Speaker, this is the most significant vote that any of us will ever be part of in our political careers. After all the debate, all the disagreement, all the division, the time has now come for all of us in this House to make a decision. A decision that will define our country for decades to come. A decision that will determine the future for our constituents, their children, and their grandchildren. A decision that each of us will have to justify and live with for many years to come. We know the consequences of voting for this deal. They are laid out in black and white in the pages of the withdrawal agreement. But no one who votes against this deal will be able to tell their constituents what real-world outcome they voted for, because a vote against this deal is a vote for nothing more than uncertainty, division, and the very real risk of no deal.
I'm very grateful for the Prime Minister for giving way. Prime Minister, on any of the analysis of Brexit, economic growth will be lower than staying in the European Union. Will the Prime Minister not realise, on the basis of the knowledge and on the fact that people are going to lose opportunities as a consequence of Brexit, the alternative is to extend Article 50, go back, give the people...
From Ian Blackford, SNP leader in the House of Commons.
On the basis of the information that we now have.
I say to the right honourable gentleman, Parliament gave the British people a choice. Parliament, the government of the time, all parties, all those campaigning in that referendum were absolutely clear that whatever the decision of that referendum, it would be respected by government and by Parliament. And I believe that we have a duty to deliver on that referendum vote, and to do so in a way that does protect people's jobs and protects our security and protects our union. A vote against this deal is a vote for nothing more than uncertainty, division, and the very real risk of no deal or no Brexit at all. And it doesn't have to be that way. Tonight we can choose certainty over uncertainty. We can choose unity over division. We can choose to deliver on our promise to the British people, not break that promise and endanger trust in politics for a generation. Because as members of Parliament, we have a duty to serve not our own self-interest nor that of our parties, but the people we were elected to represent. It is the people of this country that we were sent here to serve. The people of this country who queued up at polling stations, who cast their ballots so they might put their faith in us. It is the people of this country who entrusted us with the sacred right to build for them and their children and grandchildren the brighter future they expect and deserve. And if we act in the national interest and back this deal tonight, then tomorrow we can begin to build that future together. If we act in the national interest and back this deal tonight, we can build a country that works for everyone. Together we can show the people we serve that their voices have been heard, that their trust was not misplaced, that our politics can and does deliver, that politicians can rise above our differences and come together to do what the people asked of us. That is the test history has set for us today. It will determine the future of our country for generations. We each have a solemn responsibility to deliver Brexit and take this country forward. And with my whole heart, I call on this House to discharge that responsibility together, and I commend this motion to the House.
That was the Prime Minister. You heard every word of her speech there. Strong, passionate, urging them to vote for her deal. I have to say, I agreed with much of the rhetoric about the importance of securing Brexit. The trouble is, this deal does not match the rhetoric of the Prime Minister. MPs will head for the division lobby. We expect the result at about 8 o'clock. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show. Well, not much of it, really. Most of it, the Prime Minister. But I'm off to Strasbourg now.